I still see that email in my mind. It was a gray Tuesday morning in Seattle. Rain traced lazy paths down my window. I sat at my desk code running on one screen, my inbox open on the other. Then I clicked the subject line. Guest list updated Autumn Blake. I scrolled down. My name was gone. No warning, no thank you, just erased. 5 days before a wedding, I'd funded with nearly $100,000 of my savings. If that happened to you, what would you do? Stay silent. Fly into a rage or take control before the first guest even arrived. Drop a comment below. I want to know. I didn't panic. I leaned back and closed my eyes. The rain pattered on the glass. Then my mind drifted back to where it all began. I grew up in Tacoma, Washington, in a bright yellow house on Elm Street. Dad, Daniel Blake, spent his days wiring ships at the Bremerton Yard. Mom, Claire Blake, worked part-time at the local health clinic, greeting patients with a gentle smile. And between them, they wrapped my little sister Isla, who battled chronic migraines, in layers of caution. I was born on a stormy December afternoon, the wind rattling our old windows as Mom held me close. She named me Autumn for the copper leaves swirling just outside. From day one, I was quiet, easy. Easy to soothe, easy to feed, easy to love. And I learned early that easy meant strong. By the time I was 3, I was tying my own shoes. At 5, I walked myself to kindergarten lunchbox in hand. Isla came along. She was 8 months younger, and anything that unsettled her sent Mom and Dad into a panic. A scraped knee at the playground, Dad dropped his wrench mid-shift and raced over. A schoolyard cold, Mom stayed home for 3 days, nursing her with soup and sympathy. Me, I fell off my bike one afternoon and scraped my elbow. I cried for less than a minute. Then I dusted off my jeans and rode on. When I asked why I had to carry the groceries while Isla sat on the porch in the sun, Mom said, "You're stronger. She needs rest. Case closed." At 17, I sat on our living room couch filling out my college apps. Everyone else at Lakeside High wore silk dresses and rented limousines to prom. I wore old jeans and a sweatshirt, my laptop balanced on my knees. I typed in my SAT scores, my essays, and finally hit submit on a full-ride scholarship to Carnegie Mellon University. I should have screamed with joy. Instead, I glanced at the empty chair next to me. Isla was homesick and whispered, "Don't tell her. She'll worry." So I didn't. When I moved across the country, I carried 2 suitcases and a resolve to never ask for help. My parents sent a single box of homemade granola bars before I left. I called home twice that first term, once to tell them I'd aced my midterms, and once because my roommate's flu turned into pneumonia. Both times, Mom ended the call with, "Could you help Isla with her art supplies?" "She's struggling in her design class." I said yes. Of course I said yes. By 25, I'd built a quiet life in Seattle, a 1-bedroom loft overlooking Elliott Bay, a data engineer role at a major healthcare firm, weekend hikes on the Olympic Peninsula. I tracked my expenses in a spreadsheet, cell by cell, dollar by dollar. I saved every bonus, every raise. I skipped vacations and birthday presents. My dream was a small condo of my own, a place to plant roots. Then came the call from Mom. "Autumn, Dad had a mild stroke. He's stable, but the bills, well, you know how it goes. Just a little help if you can." I wired $3,000, then another $3,000 the next month while shelving my condo down payment. And all the while, Isla was posting selfies from Malibu yoga retreats, brunches, art shows sponsored by her well-heeled friends. When she got engaged, Mom asked if I could help with the venue deposit. I did. I didn't keep track at first, until one sleepless night, I opened my spreadsheet and realized I'd given away nearly $90,000. Every line item, venue deposit, floral design, custom candles, photography. And every time I hesitated, Mom's voice floated in, "You're our rock, Autumn. We trust you." So when that email arrived 5 days before Isla's wedding at Seabreeze Resort, I sat back and let the gray light wash over me. No space for Autumn Blake under bride's family. No RSVP field, nothing. I stared at my screen. The soft hum of my laptop filled the room. Outside, the Puget Sound mist curled around the docks, and I knew this was more than an oversight. It was the moment the story changed. No longer just the strong sister who paid for everything, far from it. I opened a new document, fingers poised over the keys. I had a decision to make. Stay silent and watch them glide through a flawless wedding. or pull the cord on this show before the first chord plays. Either way, nothing would ever be the same. That afternoon, I opened my laptop and dove back into the contracts, scrolling past familiar names. Somerset Grand, Bloomyard Florals, Coastal Flavors Catering, until I landed on cancellation clauses. My heart pounded as I drafted a single decisive email. I, Autumn Blake, signatory for the wedding of Isla Blake and Derek Shaw, formally withdraw my financial sponsorship in accordance with the Clause 14.2, effective immediately. I hit send and felt a curious calm settle over me, as if reclaiming the right to decide was more important than any refund. Next, I dialed Coastal Flavors. Michael, the catering manager, answered on the third ring. When I told him I was pulling out, he asked why, and I replied simply that the sponsor had withdrawn. No apology, no explanation. By evening, I'd canceled half the vendor's Flowers Band vintage car rental and fielded polite but stunned replies. "We understand, we'll process your refund. Sorry to hear this." With each call, I reclaimed another piece of myself that had been pledged without thought. As I worked, memories of past sacrifices flared: the laptop I sold to pay Isla's art tuition, the condo down payment I delayed for my parents' medical bills, the first-class flight I rerouted to send Isla home after a breakup. I realized I had spent my life filling everyone else's gaps, always trusting they'd notice my own needs. By midnight, I tallied the numbers: $94, $870, spent, $40, $780, refundable, then closed my eyes and let the numbers float away. For the first time in years, I didn't feel regret. I felt permission. Permission to say no to protect my savings, my dreams, my peace. 3 days later, the phone rang incessantly, first Mom, then Aunt Rose, then Karen from college. Each call began with, "Is everything okay?" and ended with a gentle rebuke that I was overreacting, that I'd ruined Isla's day. They didn't ask how I felt, only reminded me of my duty. I stopped answering. Instead, I left my phone on the table and opened a blank document titled, "My Future." I sketched bullet points: buy that condo, start therapy, reapply for that Singapore role, travel somewhere I hadn't labeled work trip. I drafted a polite family announcement: I'm stepping back. I'll no longer finance events or bailouts. Love you all. I never sent it. Instead, I packed my carry-on and booked a weekend trip to the Olympic Peninsula, a place I'd always favored for solitude. As the ferry pulled away from the Seattle docks, I watched the city shrink beneath misty skies and felt a surprising lightness. Here, amid evergreen scents and crashing waves, I let my thoughts unravel. I admitted I'd been living in service of other people's stories, never my own. I acknowledged the resentment I'd buried, under layers of "I'm fine" and "anything for you." And I resolved that this trip would be a turning point: no more invisible payments, no more silent endurance. When I returned on Sunday, I discovered a folder of forwarded vendor emails from Derek's mother, Fiona, accusing me of a breakdown and claiming I'd been emotionally unstable. They called me Fragile Autumn in an internal memo that someone leaked to the family. I printed it, then stared at the word fragile, as if seeing it for the first time. My fingers trembled not with fear, but with resolve. I photographed the memo and sent it to Rick Jensen, my attorney, with one question: what are my rights here? His reply came within the hour. We have clear documentation of your cancellations and refunds, and you can demand a retraction of those false statements. That night, I drafted another email, shorter this time, to Isla and her husband. I'm sorry you feel you needed to exclude me. I hope one day you'll understand why I chose myself over the endless giving. I never clicked send. Instead, I logged into therapy and booked my first session with Dr. Yates. While the rain tapped at my window, I wrote 2 sentences in my journal. I am more than a sponsor. I deserve to be invited. And I closed the book feeling the first stirrings of something I hadn't felt in a decade: true possibility. As I drifted to sleep, I knew that what I'd done was just the beginning. In the silence that followed, I heard my own voice for the first time in years, and it sounded like hope. Morning light filtered through the indigo curtains as I cradled my journal and a steaming mug of coffee, rereading the pages I had scribbled in the stillness of the night. The words outlined a map from anger to resolve, a path I had drawn for myself in the dark. And when my phone buzzed with another missed call from Mom, I let it lie face down on the table, untouchable and uninvited. And instead, I laced up my sneakers for a run along Lake Union, where the city seemed to exhale in the cool dawn air. And with each footfall, I felt more rooted in myself than ever before. By mid-morning, I walked into Dr. Yates's office, its walls lined with cedar-scented candles and soft watercolor panels. And when she asked what I needed most, I found myself saying, "I need to learn how to ask for help without losing myself." And her head tilted slightly, as though she had been waiting for me to say that her gentle question, "What does that look like to you?" Opening a space where I let tears slip free for the first time in years, mourning the time I had given away, and planting a seed of permission to receive in return. After the session, I drove to the office and carried a new posture into our morning stand-up venturing to accept a compliment on my latest analytics dashboard with nothing more than a quiet thank you. And when my colleague Jason nodded, as if relieved, I realized my smile carried weight I had never allowed myself to feel. Late morning found me at a cafe with Naomi, my college roommate and ongoing champion, where avocado toast and strong tea fueled a conversation about radical self-care. And she reminded me that generosity could flow both ways, that I didn't have to choose between strength and vulnerability. And as we toasted to new boundaries, I felt a warmth I hadn't known would fit inside my chest. Back at home, I opened the escrow portal where my condo deposit waited in suspended animation, the address etched on the screen. Like a promise, and with steadier hands than I could have imagined, I clicked transfer, committing my first year of mortgage to a space that would finally bear my name. Soon after, my phone chimed with an unexpected message from Lee, my former manager in Singapore. "We have an opening for the data integration lead. Your name came up. Interested?" And I paused, the memory of past sacrifice flickering for a moment, but then I tapped back, absolutely imagining the thrill of crossing continents, of building something new in a land that would no longer feel distant, but like an extension of the freedom I was claiming. In the early afternoon, Aunt Rose called. She had always been Mom's second-in-command when it came to family expectations, but this time her voice lacked reproach and carried only concern as she said, "I'm proud of you for standing up. If you ever need an ally, I'm here." And I realized my kinship map had shifted, new support sprouting where old foundations had cracked. By evening, I had returned to my journal and filled pages with a vow to honor my own needs, sketching mantras like, "I am more than my bank account and my yes is sacred." Then I placed the pen down and hovered it over a list of items I would furnish for the condo. An oak dining table, a cozy reading chair, indigo curtains to match my morning ritual, and felt a surge of creative anticipation. In the following days, I arranged for Naomi to help me paint the living room walls a soft seashell white, and we spent Saturday afternoon sipping chamomile tea as she expertly wielded rollers while I measured baseboards and sketched furniture layouts. My neighbor Mary, who lives in the unit above, dropped off a batch of homemade granola bars and offered to watch my cat while the movers came. Her kindness felt like the gentle landslide I needed to realize I was no longer invisible. I organized my financial spreadsheet into 2 columns, obligations and aspirations, and watched as the obligations column shrank beneath new entries. Therapy sessions, a weekend in Portland to visit Aunt Rose evening, language lessons to prepare for life in Singapore. Each dollar reassigned brought a deeper certainty that I could wield resources intentionally, not merely reactively. At my next therapy appointment, I shared a fragment of a dream where I built a treehouse in an oak grove overlooking a river and Dortgate. Yates smiled as I described the rope ladder symbolizing every boundary I had climbed away from. She invited me to translate that imagery into a personal ritual, so I began writing letters to my younger self, folding them carefully into envelopes marked with her birth date to read whenever doubt crept in. Meanwhile, the Singapore relocation paperwork landed on my desk in a neat envelope stamped "Approved." And I spent evenings researching neighborhoods on the island, budgeting for a co-working desk near Marina Bay, and envisioning weekend hikes among its lush trails. Work remained steady, but transformed at our monthly data summit. I proposed hosting a workshop on healthy boundary setting for engineers, sharing anonymously some of my experience and sparking a conversation that left several colleagues leaning forward with relief, as if they too had been waiting for permission. One afternoon, while finalizing my visa application, I glanced out at Elliott Bay and saw a bald eagle swoop low over the water talons outstretched, and I knew then that I was beginning to fly for myself rather than for everyone else. When closing day arrived for the condo, I signed with a smile, the pen gliding over the contract in a gesture of commitment to my own story. That night, I stood on my new balcony under a sky streaked with stars and texted Naomi I've got a home, and she replied with a string of heart emojis and, "So proud of you." I leaned against the railing, letting the hush of the city wash over me, and felt an unshakable conviction that life would never demand the price of my erasure again. Weeks later, I sat on the plane bound for Singapore, watching Seattle's skyline dissolve beneath soft clouds and feeling the weight of old expectations lift with every mile. By the time I landed in Changi, the humidity and lush greenery felt like a welcome embrace, rather than a foreign glare. And when Lee met me at the arrivals gate, with a broad smile and fresh youtiao, I realized companionship could be offered as easily as a shared breakfast. That first morning, I navigated the MRT's gleaming corridors in a light dress I'd chosen for freedom, not obligation. And each station, Raffles Place City Hall Orchard, became a marker of new territory, a reminder that I could learn fresh rhythms without apology. At the office, I found my desk overlooking Marina Bay Sands, and when I turned on my computer, I felt the hum of possibility rather than dread. My new team gathered around for a quick stand-up, and I shared progress on a complex data integration project with a confidence I'd borrowed from years of quiet determination, noticing how their eyes brightened when I paused to ask if anyone needed support proof that strength grows by inviting others in, rather than carrying the load alone. After lunch, I slipped away to the Singapore Botanic Gardens, where rain-dappled ferns and ancient palms whispered of resilience in unexpected places. And I sat by the Swan Lake to journal about my journey, the hours spent canceling contracts, the price paid in sleepless nights, and now the gift I was giving myself by learning to receive. Back at work, I introduced a boundary hour program, an invitation for engineers to block time for self-care amid project sprints. And when a colleague later thanked me for modeling that it was okay to step away, I felt a tenderness for my younger self who never dared ask. Evenings brought exploration. I haggled with a friendly hawker for kaya toast, and Kopi strolled along the Singapore River under lantern lights and marveled that cities like people reveal themselves differently when you observe rather than perform. One weekend, I joined a meditation retreat on Pulau Ubin, where wooden boardwalks led into thick mangroves, and the only echoes were birdsong. As I sat cross-legged beneath tangled vines, I felt layers of old guilt peel away each breath, a reclamation of time I'd spent as everyone's safety net. A message from Dr. Yates reminded me of the treehouse dream, inviting me to build rituals even here, so I began recording audio letters to my journal app, using the humid air around me to carry my voice farther than ink ever could. When Aunt Rose sent a care package, handmade jasmine tea and letters bound with ribbon, I realized family ties could be a source of nurture rather than chains. And I drafted a reply that spoke not of apologies, but of gratitude for belief. In the weeks that followed, I found myself saying no to after-hours meetings that dulled my edges, and instead, I joined a weekend art class in Tiong Bahru, painting bold landscapes of steel blue waves against sunset skies to honor my Mother of Autumn name. Each brushstroke carried the echo of leaves drifting free. At work, I completed the integration project ahead of schedule, presenting a dashboard that not only streamlined data flows, but highlighted patient outcomes with compassionate clarity, earning praise that felt warmer because I'd learned to receive rather than deflect. Late one night, still adjusting to the 17-hour time difference with loved ones back in Seattle, I drafted a short update to my family. I'm thriving in a city that mirrors both my resilience and my capacity to grow. I didn't ask for permission to be happy, only offered them a glimpse of what happens when the strong one chooses herself first and hit send. As I closed my laptop, the salt air drifting in through the balcony sliding door, I let go of the last thread that tied me to being the invisible anchor. Instead, I felt rooted in a place I had chosen, ready to craft a story unbound by old roles and overflowing with possibility. Months after settling into my new rhythm in Singapore, I found myself packing again, this time for Seattle, where I'd been invited to keynote a healthcare data summit. Stepping off the plane, the Pacific Northwest air felt both familiar and fresh, a reminder that home could shift shape around me without pulling me back into old patterns. I checked into a small hotel near the conference center and spent the evening unpacking my priorities, sleep a short run along Elliott Bay, and no calls to anyone who would ask me to bail them out. The next morning, I slipped into the summit foyer, carrying only a laptop bag and a quiet confidence that surprised even me. On stage, I spoke about the intersection of data ethics and patient dignity, weaving in lessons I'd learned about respecting boundaries, both in code and in life. And as I shared the story of canceling my sister's wedding contracts, I watched name tags nod in solidarity rather than judgment. Afterward, a small group of engineers approached me, one woman slipping me a note. "You gave me permission to say no." "Thank you." Her words landed like soft rain, confirming that my path had become a map for others. During a break, my phone buzzed an email from Isla. The subject line read simply coffee. My heart stuttered between caution and hope. I typed back, tomorrow 9 a.m., Bellevue Cafe, no more no less. That evening, I met Naomi for dinner at our old neighborhood bistro. As we shared plates of grilled salmon and local greens, I confessed I felt a mix of excitement and fear about seeing Isla. She reached across the table, squeezed my hand, and said, "You're not the same girl who would have paid whatever they asked. Trust yourself." The next morning, I arrived early at the cafe, my chest tight but steady. When Isla slipped in, her hair pulled back loosely and eyes rimmed pink, I recognized her vulnerability rather than the polished images I'd scrolled past on social media. We sat in silence until she whispered, "I've been angry and ashamed." I waited. "I hated that you canceled everything, but I also hated that I let it go so long. I missed you." Her words trembled on the air, and I realized she wasn't expecting sympathy, she wanted acknowledgement. "I missed you too," I said, voice soft. We traded stories her grief when Derek vanished after the wedding, my clarity, as I heard Fiona's leaked memo. We didn't apologize, we leaned into the truth. Over lattes, we sketched a plan to co-host a charity art show for migraine research, combining her design skills and my data network to raise awareness and funds. By noon, we had a date, a venue, and a shared purpose that felt like a new story rather than a chapter in an old one. Later that afternoon, I walked along the waterfront, reflecting on how far I'd come from the girl who bent her joy to spare others, to the woman who reclaimed her voice and invited her sister back on equal terms. That evening, I boarded my flight to Singapore, clutching a folder of art show proposals and carrying a heart light enough to hold both family and self without collapsing. As the plane lifted, I gazed down at the rain-speckled city lights twinkling below and felt a peaceful certainty life would continue to ask for sacrifices. But now I knew which ones I would gladly make and which ones I would never trade again. By the time I landed in Seattle after my keynote, I was brimming with anticipation for the art show Isla and I had co-created. I stepped into the Bellevue Community Center lobby early one Saturday morning, the walls lined with her graphic novel-inspired panels, illustrating migraine journeys and my data-driven infographics. Mapping support resources and the sunlight filtering through broad windows felt like a benediction. Volunteers bustled about, arranging easels and setting up the donation kiosk. I greeted each person by name, students from my mentorship group, colleagues from Singapore, neighbors from my new condo, and felt a current of community I'd never allowed myself to taste before. When the doors opened, at 10 sharp, a steady stream of visitors flowed in, families touched by headache disorders, fellow engineers curious about creative activism, reporters jotting down quotes for the next day's paper. Isla stood beside me, in a pale blue cardigan, her hands shaking slightly as she welcomed the first guests. I slipped an arm around her shoulders and whispered, "We're doing it!" And her smile shone with relief and pride. Later, I took the microphone for opening remarks, my voice steady as I shared our journey from a sister's silent sacrifices to a partnership that honored both our strengths. And when I spoke of canceling the wedding contracts, I saw nods and misty eyes in the audience, proof that honesty can heal more than silence ever could. Afterward, we led guided tours of the exhibit, pausing before a sequence of watercolor leaves, converging into data points to explain how vulnerability and analytics collided to drive real change. A middle school student pressed a handful of crumpled bills into Isla's palm, saying, "This is all I have, but I believe in your story, and I watched my sister protect that gift like sacred trust, no longer expecting me to fill the gaps alone." As afternoon light slanted through the windows, we unveiled the final piece, an interactive wall where visitors placed colored pins to mark their own boundaries and support networks, creating a vibrant tapestry that pulsed with collective strength. When the show closed, we had raised more than $10,000 for migraine research and referrals. And as we tallied totals, Isla grabbed my hand and said, "Thank you for inviting me back into your life." And in that moment, I realized she wasn't thanking me for money, but for presence. That evening, we walked the waterfront neon city lights, dancing on the wet pavement as we traded stories of the day's laughter and tears. We didn't need to fill every silence with words, because our steps spoke volumes, a cadence of healing resilience and newfound equality. Back at my condo, I drafted a short note. "Dear Mom and Dad, thank you for believing we could make a difference." Then paused, wondering if I'd slipped into old patterns of obligation. Instead, I deleted the draft and sent them a simple text. Show was a success. Proud of Isla and our team. No explanations. No invitations to bail anyone out. The next morning, I woke before dawn, brewed spicy ginger tea, and journaled 2 sentences that felt revolutionary. I am enough on my own terms, and I choose the stories that honor both my strength and my softness. Then I sat at my desk, opened a blank travel planner, and began mapping a detour through New Zealand. On my way back to Singapore, savoring the idea of days unhurried by requests or rescues. Later that week, Dr. Yates called to check in, and when she heard the warmth in my voice, she simply said, "You've come home to yourself," which felt truer than any address or job title. I smiled and thanked her. In her silence, I heard the echo of every boundary I'd honored and every river of possibility I'd followed. On Sunday, I visited the farmer's market near my condo, bought a bouquet of wildflowers for my balcony table, and let strangers admire their bright petals without adding, "I hope this helps you." By mid-morning, I had an email from Lee offering me a seat on a global data ethics advisory board, and I accepted without hesitation, because now I knew when to say yes and when to guard my time. As the sun climbed higher, I sat on my balcony, warm light washing over me, and reflected on the arc of a story that began with erasure and ended in invitation to choose myself to partner with my sister on terms of mutual respect to weave personal truth into professional purpose. In that quiet hour, I understood that life will always ask for sacrifices, but the most important one is the courage to refuse the wrong requests and embrace the ones that honor our boundaries. And so I breathe in deeply, feeling the city's pulse beneath me, ready to write the next chapter in a life I claim as my own. Story 2. They always say birthdays are about family togetherness celebration. But when my sister Allison texted me, "Mom 65 is at Carver House. Be on time," I knew better than to expect warmth. "No, can't wait to see. You know we'd love to have you, just logistics, like I was a delivery driver, not her only sibling." Still, I booked the flight. Maybe I'm naive, or maybe just stubborn. I built something real, my own company, my own name. But when I come home, I'm still just the girl who left. The one who doesn't bake casseroles or host game nights. The one no one mentions unless they want to sound generous. This year, I told myself would be different. This year, I was showing up. No apologies. What I didn't know was that my sister had already decided where I belonged, and it wasn't at the table with the rest of the family. Carver House was beautiful in a predictable Pinterest perfect kind of way. White tablecloths, gold-trimmed menus, floral centerpieces, like they'd been plucked from a wedding shoot. I arrived 5 minutes early, hoping to avoid the spectacle of walking in late. But the moment I stepped into the private dining room, I knew I'd made a mistake. Allison was in her element, directing servers, air-kissing relatives, adjusting name cards like a queen arranging her court. When she spotted me, she smiled, but it was the kind that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, Julia." She called out brightly, her voice loud enough for the whole room. "You're here? We weren't sure you'd make it with your schedule." I smiled tightly. "Good to see you too, Allison." She handed me a small place card. "You're at Table B, right over there." Table B. Turned to look past the long family table, draped in crystal and candlelight, to a small round table tucked against the back wall. One chair was pulled out, already set awkwardly beside a swinging door labeled storage. The other seats at the table were empty and unassigned. My throat went dry. "This isn't with the family." Allison blinked, feigning confusion. "Oh, I thought you'd appreciate a little space. You've always been more independent." I swallowed the heat rising in my chest. This wasn't an oversight. It was deliberate. A power play dressed in politeness. Behind her, my mother caught my eye and gave a small apologetic smile, but said nothing. I walked to my seat slowly, heels clicking too loud on the tile floor. I set my clutch on the table, took a breath, and sat down. From here I could see everything. Allison laughing with our cousin's mom seated near the center, like a guest of honor. Dad talking with Uncle Roy about lawn care. I might as well have been watching through glass. I took out my phone and opened a blank text to Chloe seated at the staff table. Classic. "Allison, move." I didn't hit send. Instead, I put the phone away, smoothed my dress, and reached for the water glass. It was already half full. Lukewarm. Probably poured hours ago. Fine, I thought. If she wants to make me small, let her try. I've eaten in rooms tougher than this with investors who tore apart my business model, with chefs who didn't believe in women running kitchens. I didn't flinch then, and I wouldn't now. What Allison didn't know was that this time I wasn't just attending dinner at Carver House. I had just signed the paperwork, making me one of its owners. She might have picked the seat, but I owned the building from my seat near the storage closet. I watched the family version of me take shape across the room, assembled dissected, and served like one of the appetizers making its rounds. "She's doing something in food tech." I think I heard my cousin Meredith say, tilting her head like I was an abstract painting. I thought she was in catering. And Barbara replied, "Didn't she drop out of engineering school? No. That was before she moved to New York." Someone else added, "Or was it San Francisco? They didn't ask me directly." Of course, they never did. It was easier to guess to shape their own version of Julia Monroe, and that was easier to dismiss. I'd stopped trying to correct them years ago, the last time I'd brought it up. Mom had winced. "Honey, not everyone understands startups. Just say you work in food. It's simpler." Simpler, sure. Also erasing. They never asked how I raised $2.5 million in venture funding before I turned 29. Never asked how it felt to pitch a room of 12 middle-aged men who saw me as a passion project, not a CEO. They didn't know about the sleepless nights, the failed prototypes, the warehouse fire that nearly destroyed my second quarter. But they all knew Allison's daughter had won the regional spelling bee twice. I don't blame them, really. Allison stayed. She married, had kids, bought a house 4 blocks from where we grew up. She showed up for bake sales and church raffles, kept the Monroe name shiny in the neighborhood. Me, I left. And that in their eyes was a quiet betrayal. Across the room, my father chuckled at something Uncle Roy said. His face was relaxed content, the same expression he used to have when he'd teach me to change the oil in our old Chevy before I stopped being the daughter who played by the rules. When I told him I was launching a food tech platform that paired local chefs with underused commercial kitchens, he'd frowned. Restaurants fail all the time. Jules, so do marriages. I'd replied without thinking. The silence that followed had lasted weeks. At that table, I was the family anomaly. Too ambitious, too distant to coastal here. I was a ghost in a designer dress. "Excuse me," a soft voice interrupted. I looked up. A young woman in a server's uniform stood at the edge of the table, holding a small tray of mini quiches. I didn't realize this table was seated. "Would you like one?" I smiled. "Sure. Thanks." She placed 2 on my plate, hesitated, then said, "I'm Maddie. I can bring you whatever you need tonight for a second." I saw something in her eyes. Curiosity, maybe even recognition. Not of who I was, but of what it felt like to be on the outside. Pretending it didn't sting. "Thank you, Maddie," I said warmly. "I'll be fine." But I wasn't. Not yet. 10 minutes passed, maybe 15. No one from the main table glanced my way. Not Allison, not Dad. Not even Mom, who usually tried to offer a peacekeeping smile when things got awkward. The only acknowledgement I got was from a passing server who nearly bumped my chair while rushing toward the kitchen. I sipped lukewarm water and forced myself to breathe. I'd faced worse boardroom meltdowns, supply chain collapses. That one investor who tried to kiss my cheek after telling me he'd take a chance on a pretty face. This was just family. Then Maddie returned. She was carrying a plate and a water bottle this time. Figured you might want something that's not half warm, she said shyly, sliding the plate in front of me. These just came out stuffed mushrooms. They're really good. Thanks, I said, surprised by how sincere my voice sounded. I appreciate it. She hovered awkwardly, then gestured to the empty chairs around me. This table's not usually used for guests. It's where we take breaks. Hope that's okay. I let out a soft laugh. It's perfect. I've always liked the back of the house better anyway. Maddie tilted her head. You work in restaurants in a way, I said, then added, I run a company that partners with restaurants and food startups. We help match culinary talent with resources, kitchens, training, logistics support. Her eyes widened. Seriously, that's cool. Before I could answer, 2 more staff members approached the table. Owen, tall and lanky, maybe college-age, the other older, in her 40s, with a commanding presence. Hey, Maddie, the older woman said, setting down her tray. You joining the table? Maddie gave a half smile. Kind of. This is Julia, her sisters. Well, she got seated here. Both of them turned to me, instantly understanding. Oh, honey, the older woman said, sliding into a chair without hesitation. I've worked enough family events to know what that's about. The tall one, his name tag read. Ben chimed in. My cousin made me sit by the bathroom at her wedding because I wore a tie with cartoon dinosaurs. Family politics are brutal. I really laughed for the first time that night. It caught me off guard. The way kindness always does when you're not expecting it. We fell into easy conversation. Maddie was studying food science at the community college. Ben was saving up to transfer to state. The older woman, her name was Carla, had been working in events for over a decade. She had stories that could make or break anyone's appetite. They didn't care that I was Julia Monroe, founder of a tech startup. They just saw a woman seated at the wrong table, trying not to flinch. And they chose to sit beside me as I chewed a perfectly seasoned mushroom and listened to Carla tell the story of a father of the bride who once spilled Chardonnay into the wedding cake. I felt something shift. Maybe I didn't belong at the main table tonight, but I wasn't alone. Not anymore. Just as Carla was launching into a story about a runaway flower girl and a flaming chafing dish, the room shifted. The server straightened. The hum of kitchen noise quieted. Even the maitre d', who had been directing staff near the bar, suddenly stood taller. Someone important had just entered. And then I saw him. Mr. Carter, the general manager of Carver House, striding into the private room with practiced warmth and quiet authority. Silver hair, pressed suit, the kind of smile that had diffused 100 bridal breakdowns. I'd like to take a moment to personally welcome our guests this evening, he said, projecting clearly without a microphone. It's an honor to host the Monroe family and help celebrate Mrs. Elaine Monroe's 65th birthday. There was polite applause. My mother beamed. My sister Allison practically preened. Carter continued. As some of you may know, Carver House has recently entered a new phase of ownership. We were acquired by a hospitality group known for its innovation and deep respect for culinary tradition. Allison tilted her head, curious. It is my great pleasure to introduce someone who has already made a remarkable impact on our operations. A person whose vision and leadership are the reason we've retained our entire staff, expanded our sourcing partnerships, and preserved the soul of this place. He turned and looked directly at me. Julia Monroe. Silence. Real heavy glass clinking. Silence. Every head turned. Even the kitchen doors paused in their swinging at the main table. Forks froze midair. My mother's hand slowly dropped to her lap. My father's eyebrows shot up, and Allison's mouth actually opened as if trying to form words that refused to come. Julia is one of the founders of the group that now owns Carver House. Carter continued walking toward our little table in the back. Her company's approach is what convinced us to join the merger. She values people over profit legacy, over branding, and we're lucky to have her. I stood not because I wanted to, but because staying seated felt impossible under the weight of 100 staring eyes. Mr. Carter offered his hand. "Thank you for entrusting us with your vision, Miss Monroe." I took it, murmuring, "Thank you for keeping the heart of this place." He turned to address the room again, now with something like pride in his voice. "I'm sorry if there was any confusion about seating this evening, but Miss Monroe will of course be joining the head table as our honored guest." A flurry of movement followed. A server rushed to add a chair. Another brought a fresh glass. My mother was already wiping tears with her napkin. My father nodded slowly, as if recalculating everything he thought he knew. And Allison, she sat frozen, colorless, speechless, defeated in a game I never agreed to play. I gathered my clutch, gave Maddie a grateful look, and whispered thanks for the company. Carla raised her glass slightly in salute. "You always had better people at this table anyway." As I made my way across the room, the applause resumed, hesitant at first, then fuller. Each step felt like reclaiming something I didn't know I'd lost. Not just respect or place or voice, but self-worth and the knowledge that no matter where they tried to seat me, I knew exactly who I was. Now, the head table looked different now. Maybe it was the extra chair squeezed between Mom and Dad. Maybe it was the silence that settled as I sat down, but something had shifted. No one quite knew what to say. Mom reached for my hand, squeezing it like a lifeline. Her eyes shimmered, not with judgment or confusion, but something closer to her. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered. "I didn't know we'd be coming here." I replied softly and honestly, I wasn't sure it mattered. Dad cleared his throat but didn't speak. Instead, he poured me a glass of water, then passed the pitcher down the line from him. That was practically an emotional monologue across the table. Allison still hadn't moved. She sat upright, lips pressed thin wine untouched. The light in her eyes had gone dim, eclipsed by something sharp and quiet. Humiliation. Maybe I wanted to feel victorious. I really did. For years, I'd swallowed her subtle jabs about my career, my clothes, my single status, my big city life. I'd watched her parade her perfect family and PTA trophies while dismissing my success as a phase. This was supposed to be the moment I proved her wrong. And yet, sitting here surrounded by candlelight and clinking glasses, all I felt was tired. When dessert arrived, Mom's favorite lemon tarty, barely touched it. Mr. Carter returned with a bottle of champagne on the house. He smiled to the woman whose company saved us. There was a toast. Everyone raised their glasses. Even Dad murmured something about being proud of both daughters. Allison didn't raise hers. She just stood. "I'm going to the restroom," she said flatly, then turned and walked away. No one followed. No one except me. Because even through the satisfaction and the recognition and the justified applause, I saw the storm she was holding in, and part of me still, after everything, wanted to understand it. The hallway was quiet. The polished wood floors absorbed the noise from the dining room behind me. When I pushed open the restroom door, she was there, gripping the edge of the marble sink, eyes locked on her own reflection. "You didn't have to come in here," she said without looking at me. "I know." Silence stretched between us. "You win," she added bitterly. "Congratulations." My chest tightened. This was never a competition. I said quietly, "Maybe not to you." She snapped, turning toward me. "But it was always one to me." Her voice cracked, and for the first time, I didn't see the polished, confident woman who ran fundraisers and family calendars. I saw a sister wounded, cornered, small in her own skin. And maybe I saw a mirror, because under the shine of my own triumph, something inside me was unraveling too. "I hated seeing you succeed," Allison said, her voice raw. "Not because you didn't deserve it, but because it reminded me that I never even tried." I stood frozen, the weight of her words hitting harder than any insults she'd ever thrown. "I stayed," she continued, still gripping the sink. "I followed the rules. I did everything right. Got married, had kids join the neighborhood board, baked cupcakes. And somehow I still ended up feeling invisible. I swallowed to who to Dad? To you, to myself, sometimes." She finally looked at me. Her mascara smudged the steel in her posture, cracking. "Do you know what it's like?" She asked, to live 4 blocks from the house we grew up in and still feel like no one sees you anymore. I stepped closer. Do you know what it's like to build something from scratch alone in a city where no one cares about your last name to come home and still be treated like the reckless one? She blinked. I wasn't trying to outshine you, Allison. I was just trying to matter to someone somewhere. And I thought if I got far enough, big enough, maybe even you'd finally say you were proud of me. The words broke from me before I could stop them. She leaned back against the wall, arms folded, staring at the floor. I am, she said softly. Proud of you. I mean, I just didn't know how to say it without feeling like I was disappearing. I never wanted you to disappear, I replied. I just wanted a seat at the same table. Her laugh was dry. Well, you ended up owning the damn table. Silence. Then I said something I hadn't planned to say. You know, Carver House is looking for a new community liaison. Someone who understands the town, the people. Someone who knows how to organize and lead. She glanced at me warily. Are you offering me a job? I'm offering you a bridge, I said. A way for us to stop pretending we live on separate islands. She was quiet for a long time. Then, what if I fail? You won't, I said without hesitation. But if you do, I'll be there. We stood there for a moment. Two women, no longer just sisters, but survivors of years of quiet competition and buried resentment. Stripped down, honest. She wiped under her eyes, checked her reflection. I should probably go back out there before Mom sends a search party. I smiled faintly. She always did have a sixth sense for sibling drama. As we opened the door, Allison hesitated. Julia, yeah. Thank you for seeing me, for finally letting me, I replied. And for the first time in years, we walked back into the room together. The dining room had settled into the quiet hum of post-dessert. Contentment. Plates were half cleared. Champagne glasses twinkled in candlelight, and Mom was in deep conversation with a second cousin I barely recognized. Only a few people noticed when Allison and I returned. No grand entrance, no dramatic reappearance. Just two sisters walking side by side. Mom's eyes lit up the moment she saw us. She didn't say anything, just reached across the table and squeezed both our hands. That simple touch felt like a benediction. Allison took her seat without the usual stiffness. I reclaimed mine beside her. The tension between us had thinned, not vanished, but softened like fabric worn by time and care. Later, as the family began to disperse, I stepped aside with Humberto on the garden terrace, just outside the banquet room. The cool night air wrapped around us like a curtain between two worlds. The one we had survived, and the one we were still shaping. I meant what I said. I told her about the position at Carver House. She glanced at me, half curious, half defensive. You really think I'd be good at it? I know you would. I leaned against the railing. You're organized, decisive, and you know how to make people feel heard. This place needs that. I need that. She was quiet. It wouldn't be charity. No, I said firmly. It would be trust. A beat passed. Then she chuckled. Brad's going to think I've lost my mind. Let him. I grinned. You can remind him that you once ran the school fundraiser with 3 volunteers and a broken copier. Allison laughed. Our real from the belly kind of laugh I hadn't heard in years. God, that copier. I still have toner nightmares. We fell into a comfortable silence, broken only by the distant clinking of glassware being cleared inside. Then softly she said, You know what scares me most? I turned to her that if I take this job and I love it, and I realize I've wasted all these years doing what I thought I was supposed to do instead of what I actually wanted. I nodded, understanding more than she knew. It's not too late to want something else, I said. Not ever. She looked out over the garden, arms folded, but looser, now her face no longer braced against the world. I'll think about it, she said. Seriously, that's all I'm asking. As we walked back inside to say our goodbyes, something had changed, not just between us, but inside us. No longer competitors, no longer strangers in matching bloodlines. We weren't rebuilding the past. We were starting something new together. A week later, I got a text from Allison, stopped by Carver House this morning. S8 in the garden. Thought about things. Let's talk. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. And that was enough for now. The following Sunday, Mom hosted brunch at her place. Nothing fancy, just pancakes, fresh berries, coffee, and mismatched mugs. The kind of meal that had anchored our family long before seating charts and champagne ever entered the picture. Allison brought her kids. I brought fresh pastries from my favorite bakery in the city. We sat at the old wooden table Dad refinished years ago with its uneven legs and water rings from 1,000 meals past. No one brought up the gala. No one had to. Instead, we passed plates, swapped stories, argued playfully about syrup preferences. Allison reached for the coffee pot, refilled my cup without a word. And somewhere in the middle of that morning, amid the clatter of forks and the smell of cinnamon, I realized something. We'd finally found our table. Not the one they assigned us, not the one they excluded us from, but the one we built together with honesty, with history, with room for both of us. And in that moment, it wasn't about who sat where. It was about showing up, staying, seeing each other. Maybe that's all any of us really want. A place to belong on our own terms. Story 3. My name is Megan. I'm 34 years old, living alone in a small apartment in Cleveland. And I had never been a mother until the day my entire family applauded because I was given the opportunity to raise 3 children that weren't mine. No one asked if I was ready. No one even looked me in the eye when they made the announcement during my grandmother's 80th birthday party. Like I was the obvious choice. Like I was born to replace an absent mother. But what they didn't know was that I had quietly quit my job, giving up my lease, and was preparing to disappear from a life I never chose. Have you ever been turned into the convenient solution in your own family? Leave a comment if you know what that feels like. And don't forget to like and subscribe to hear the rest of this story. Because right after this, I'll tell you what happened. When I decided not to be the obedient shadow anymore. I'm the middle child of 3 sisters, and if you've ever been the one in the middle, you probably know what that means. Not the focus of expectations, like the eldest, and not the spoiled one, like the youngest. I grew up in a household that was always lively, but never loud because of me. I was Megan, the easygoing, understanding, considerate kid everyone believed would never bother anyone. My sister Rachel was the complete opposite. She's 2 years older than me and had always known how to make the world revolve around her. When she cried, the whole house held its breath. When she laughed, everyone caught some of that joy. Every family decision, from vacations to dinner plans, had to factor in Rachel's mood. When Rachel got married at 25, our parents seemed relieved. But that marriage fell apart after 8 years and 3 children. The reason it changed, depending on who she was talking to. Sometimes her husband cheated. Sometimes she just needed to find herself the real reason. I don't think she even knows. After the divorce, Rachel moved back into a rented apartment on the 2nd floor, close to our parents' house. An apartment I ended up paying half the rent for just for a few months. You get it right. The 2nd month turned into the 10th. Then nobody mentioned anymore that I was the one footing the bill for her little family. It became an unspoken obligation, as if not doing it meant I was being unfair to the kids. The 3 kids, Aiden 10-year-old, Lily 8, and Max the youngest, who had just turned 5. They weren't at fault. Truly, they were smart, sensitive children, and sometimes so sweet. It softened me, but they also carried the chaos of their mother with them. I remember the first time Rachel left them at my place. Only an hour. I'm getting my hair done and a quick massage. I was in the middle of preparing a data analysis for a client. I told her, Rachel, I have a Zoom meeting at 2:00. She laughed, kissed my forehead like I was a child and said, "You've got this." They're really well behaved. Then she vanished for 5 hours. From then on, every emergency babysitting became my job once because Rachel needed a weekend to heal. Another time because a friend introduced me to an amazing guy, and I'd regret it forever if I didn't go. And every time I was the one canceling plans, putting myself on hold, rushing to throw dinner in the oven, while calming Max's cries, Aiden yelling, then sulking, and Lily crossing her arms saying, "Mom says Aunt Megan's always free. That's why she's not married." I tried talking about it gently, indirectly. Once I said, "Rachel, I need my own space too. Can we make a schedule in advance?" She dropped into a chair, covering her face like I'd splashed her with cold water. Do you know how tired I am? Being a single mom is hard. Every time I think someone understands me, they turn their back. When did I ever turn my back? Or maybe I never did. I stopped running after her. I told my mom. My mom, who lives by the Motto family, is everything. frowned and said, "Sweetheart, Rachel needs compassion. She's lost her whole family. You can't be so rigid." I asked, "And what about me? Who has compassion for me when my entire youth is chipped away, night by night, weekend by weekend?" My mom said, "Don't say things like that in front of the kids. They're your nieces and nephews." Yes, they are, but they're not my default responsibility. I wasn't born to be someone's stand-in. I'm not a background character in my sister's redemption story. No matter how much I love those kids, no one gets to treat that love like a given. But in that house, our parents' house, my love was always the one thing that didn't need asking, didn't need thinking, didn't need permission. All it took was Megan, and I was expected to show up. And I did, until I started feeling like I was disappearing from my own life. Started wondering if one day I stopped showing up. Would they even notice, or would they simply find someone else to replace me Thursday night? I had collapsed onto the couch after a long day when there was a loud knock at the door before I could stand up. The doorbell rang over and over. I sighed, looked at the clock. It was 7:48 p.m. I opened the door and instantly knew I wouldn't be sleeping early that night. Rachel stood there holding Max, who was wailing from exhaustion behind her. Aiden was dragging a rolling suitcase, and Lily was clutching a pillow and a toy bag. Rachel's eyes were glassy, her blonde hair tied in a hurry, perfume still fresh, like it had just been sprayed in the elevator. "I'm sorry for the short notice, but this is really important." Before I could say a word, she shoved Max into my arms. He buried his face into my shoulder, leaving snot all over my freshly ironed blouse. "David is about to move in with me. I can't let him know I have kids. Not yet. He still thinks I'm just a divorcee with no strings attached." I froze. "What did you say?" "You know me. I'll sort everything out soon. I need a solid foundation with David. He's a good guy. Steady job, owns a house. Not like the others I dated. This might be my only chance." I took a step back, trying to support Max's growing weight in my arms. "Rachel, I can't. What did you say?" She looked stunned. "I'm busy. I have plans, and I can't keep being the shadow behind all of yours." Her face changed instantly from pleading to blaming Megan. "How can you say that? You don't have kids. You live alone. You're the only one in this family who can help. Not having children doesn't mean I owe anyone motherhood." She went quiet for 3 seconds, then turned and grabbed her phone. I knew exactly who she was calling from the first beep. Less than 5 minutes later, my phone rang. "Mom, Megan." Her voice was low and deliberate. "Your sister is going through a tough time. You can't refuse her like this. She's sacrificed so much for those kids." I gripped the phone tightly. "Mom, I've helped her for 2 years. I've canceled trips, missed chances. I pay half her rent, take care of the kids every weekend, and no one asks if I'm okay." Mom cut me off. "But this time is different. This is her future. David is a decent man. If your sister doesn't hold on to this relationship, those 3 kids might lose their chance at a father. And what about me? Don't I deserve a future? Don't I have the right to live by my own schedule?" Silence. Then my mother's voice dropped colder. "Family comes first, Megan. Everyone has to sacrifice a little. A younger sister should sacrifice so her older sister can find happiness. You're the only one without obligations. If you don't help, who will?" That question hit like a clean blade, cutting right where it always had. If you don't help, who will? It had echoed for years, when Dad was in the hospital, when Grandma had her stroke, when Rachel got divorced, when someone needed to pick up a birthday cake cook, Thanksgiving dinner, or drive a kid who missed the bus. I was always the one they called. Not because I was the best, but because I didn't complain. And this time was no different. I looked at Rachel. She wasn't crying anymore. She knew that once Mom called, I'd cave. 3 days. I have work starting Monday. She hugged me. Not a real hug. A hollow gesture to mark her victory. "I knew you were a good person." That night, Max threw up chocolate milk on the living room rug. Aiden screamed about losing Wi-Fi. And Lily knocked over the glass vase I'd been given for my promotion last year. I skipped dinner, sat there scrubbing vomit out of the carpet, picking crushed flower petals from under the table. And that's when it hit me. No one had asked how my day was. At 9:20, I tucked all 3 kids into a makeshift bed of pillows and blankets. I returned to the living room, finally able to turn on the TV. My favorite show was rerunning. I hadn't even sat down when a loud crack came from the bedroom, a sharp sound like glass shattering. I rushed in. The 52-inch TV, the one I'd saved for nearly 6 months to buy, was cracked straight through. Max was sitting there stunned, still holding the remote. "I didn't mean to," he mumbled. Lily pushed me. I threw the remote on the bed and it bounced into the TV. Max sobbed through his words. "Liar!" Lily yelled from the corner. "You got mad and smashed it. Don't blame me." Aiden was wearing headphones, pretending not to hear anything. I stood there in the dark room staring at the broken screen, unable to breathe. It felt like I had shattered too. I sat down, staring at the fracture running across the screen, reflecting back my face, small, blurry, and completely invisible in my own home. I didn't sleep that night. After the remote cracked the TV, Max cried for nearly half an hour, terrified he'd get in trouble. Lily was still upset, muttering under her blanket that he always gets away with everything. Aiden, the oldest, sat at the edge of the bed, pale under the dim night light. I didn't scream. I didn't even have the strength to cry. I quietly placed the cracked remote on the shelf, taped the broken screen, then returned to the kitchen, where dinner dishes were still piled like a miniature disaster zone. My once quiet apartment now felt like a chaotic preschool. The sofa stained with chocolate milk Max had spilled earlier that morning. The white porcelain plate, a gift from a former client. When I won Employee of the Year, was now 2 large shards and countless splinters. I swept into the trash all Saturday and Sunday. I didn't leave the house not because I was free, but because I was tied to 3 kids dancing on the edge of my patience. Max demanded pancakes with syrup and fresh strawberries every meal, sobbing whenever I served anything else. Lily refused to shower because at Mom's house, I only bathe on Tuesdays and Fridays. Aiden played video games nonstop, and when I reminded him about homework, he shrugged and said, "You're not my mom." I tried. I really tried. I cooked full lunches with vegetables and fruit. No one ate. I laid out a blanket and turned on a cartoon for them all to watch. 5 minutes later, Lily was crying because Max grabbed the remote, and Aiden complained it was for babies. I called Rachel 3 times. No answer. I texted Rachel. Max broke the TV. I'm seriously overwhelmed. No reply. By Sunday evening, I stepped into the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. My hair was a mess. The dark circles under my eyes looked sketched in charcoal. My t-shirt was stained with orange juice. Max had spit out because he didn't like that kind. I tried to remember the last time I sat alone with a cup of coffee at my favorite cafe. When was that? A month ago? 2. I wasn't sure I remembered loving quiet. This apartment used to smell like vanilla candles. Now it reeked of snacks and grape juice. At 6:15 p.m., I was boiling pasta for the kids when I heard a knock at the door. Rachel, light makeup, green dress hair, and soft curls. She looked like she'd come straight from the spa. "I'm here to pick up the kids." She smiled. "That they were you out?" I said nothing. She stepped in, glanced at the kitchen, then looked over at the kids playing Legos in the living room. "Okay, guys, let's go. Mommy's parked outside." The kids cheered like I was the Wicked Witch and she was the fairy godmother. Come to rescue them. Fine. At least I didn't have to fake a smile. I packed up their clothes, wrapped Mac's wet sneakers in a bag. He jumped in the puddle on the balcony as I placed the last bag by the door. Rachel turned back. "Oh, Megan," she said casually. "Can you help again next weekend? David's taking me to meet his parents in Vermont. I need some alone time to make a good impression. They're a bit old-fashioned, so the kids wouldn't really fit in." I opened my mouth to say something, but paused. I looked at the 3 kids tumbling down the stairs, mismatched shoes laughing loud enough to echo down the hall. Rachel didn't wait for an answer. She waved. "Thanks in advance. I knew you wouldn't say no. You're always amazing." The door closed. I remained alone in the apartment. Now quiet again, dinner still bubbling on the stove. I turned it off. S8 down. The TV screen was still cracked, like a cold smash through the living room and through me. 3 days later, on a gloomy weekday afternoon, I was working in my home office when my phone buzzed with a message. It was from Shannon, Rachel's longtime friend. She had been a bridesmaid in Rachel's wedding, and though we weren't super close, we'd had coffee a few times. Enough to be real with each other again. "Sorry to text this, but I think you should know." I stopped typing, eyes fixed on the screen. I had lunch with Rachel today. She talked about her no kids phase. He said David's moving in by the end of the month. But since he's not ready for kids, she plans to leave the three of them at your place for at least a few months. She even joked she'd hire a babysitter with your money. Megan lives alone and doesn't have kids, so of course she'll help. That's a direct quote. I set my phone down. My throat felt like it was being crushed by an invisible hand. I remembered every moment from the past few weeks when Rachel tested leaving them with me. Her lines like, "I know you'll always be there when I need you," and that Sunday night when she said I'd be thanked soon enough. Not a few days. Not a one-time thing. It was a long-term plan. I walked out of my home office and stood in front of the cracked TV, still unreplaced, like a silent reminder. I had let something slip away a long time ago. Not just boundaries, but ownership of my own life. Every time I said I'm busy or I need personal time, they called it selfish. Every time Rachel needed a break, I was the babysitter. Every month, she paid half the rent. The other half came quietly from my bank account. Without thanks, without asking, but this time, it was an entire scheme built on lies where I would play the stand-in mother so my sister could shine as a carefree woman. I picked up my phone and typed, "Thank you for being honest, Shannon. I truly appreciate it." Shannon replied almost instantly, "I don't mean to interfere, but the way Rachel treats you, it's not fair. And hiding her kids from her new boyfriend. That crosses a line. She told David she's mentoring 3 kids at the local church. Didn't say they're her own." My heart tightened. I had grown used to her selfishness, but I still couldn't believe she was willing to deny her own children, just for a few months of starting fresh. I looked around my apartment. My apartment, a place that used to be a quiet little haven where I once dreamed of simple things. Peace. A night with a book, a pot of hot soup in the winter. Now it was about to become a hiding spot for 3 children unacknowledged by their father and temporarily stored away by their own mother so she could date. I didn't hate the kids, but I hated being treated like a tool. Hated that every time my sister wanted to reinvent herself, I had to sacrifice small pieces of my own life. I returned to my desk and opened my banking app. My finger hovered over the recurring monthly transfer, $825, Rachel's rent support. I didn't cancel it then, but I started drawing a way out. I stayed silent. No emails, no angry texts, no confrontation, no clear-the-air conversation. There simply began packing. The next morning, I called Mr. Wilkins, my landlord, a man in his 60s, who lives downstairs and adored his plants. "I know the lease has 4 months left." I said, my voice unusually calm, "but I'm dealing with a family situation. I need to move out early. If you find someone to take over, I can be out by the end of the week." He was quiet for a few seconds, then said warmly, "You've always paid on time. Never made noise. Kept the place in great shape. I actually have a family meeting, something urgently. If you move out by Friday, I'll refund your entire deposit." I thanked him and hung up. That was it. No drama. No one begging me to stay. By that afternoon, I found a 1-bedroom apartment in Columbus about a 2-hour drive away. It was near a park with a balcony that overlooked a river. The landlord was a widow named Deborah, her voice kind and Midwestern. She told me I could move in anytime, as long as I was okay watering her plants on hot days. I said I can start moving tomorrow. That evening, as I opened the closet to begin packing, a strange feeling washed over me. Not sadness, something lighter. As if I had opened a secret door inside myself and the wind was finally coming in. I started with the things no one ever noticed. Books, scented candles, spice jars. Old photos no one had ever asked about. Every night after work, I stuffed things into boxes, drove small loads to the new apartment I rented. No truck, asked no one for help. Told neither Amy, my best friend, nor Mom. Sent no text to Rachel. Posted nothing on social media. Left without a trace. Every day after 5 p.m., I disappeared a little more from the old place, and each night I arrived a little more in the new one. The Columbus apartment was still empty when I got the keys, but the soft balcony light in the afternoon and the sound of the nearby river softened something inside me, like folding a shirt that's finally been ironed smooth. I bought a new moss green rug, a low bookshelf, a set of white floral bed sheets picked by me, not judged by anyone as too old-fashioned. For the first time, everything was mine. No voices chiming in, no critical glances. This little place was the first where I didn't need permission to exist. Exactly as I am. By Wednesday, I stood in the old apartment among patchy white walls in the empty spaces that used to hold memories that weren't mine. The spot where Max spilled milk on the sofa in the corner, where Lily sulked about brushing her teeth. The side of the TV still cracked, still silent. I placed the old remote on the shelf, removed the batteries wipes, the kitchen counters, unplugged the Wi-Fi, shut off the water valve under the sink. Then I paused in front of the bathroom mirror for a long moment. My face looked peaceful. I wasn't leaving out of anger. I was leaving because it was time. Friday, I left the keys in an envelope, wrote my name on it, and slipped it into Mr. Wilkins' mailbox. Got into my car, sat there for a few seconds before starting the engine in the rearview mirror. I saw that familiar window still slightly ajar, the little potted plants swaying in the breeze. I didn't say goodbye, but in my heart, I knew I had closed a door I should have shut a long time ago. Saturday morning, I woke to soft sunlight streaming through the curtains of my new apartment in Columbus. I brewed a cup of black coffee, sat on the balcony, watching the river drift lazily past the rocky edge, feeling for the first time in years like my mind could finally flow in peace. I knew exactly what day it was. Rachel had made it clear the week before. I'll drop the kids off early around 9 a.m. Don't forget breakfast. Okay, Max doesn't like cereal. Aiden only eats pancakes if they have that specific syrup. And Lily needs soy milk. I stayed silent, and she never asked again. At the exact same time, over 120 miles away, Rachel was knocking on my old apartment door for the 30th time. The 3 kids stood behind her, each clutching a large bag. Still groggy, Aiden stared at his phone. Lily complained about the heat, and Max started whining that he needed to use the bathroom. The doorbell made no sound. She pressed and held it. Still nothing. On the door, a note taped near the handle read, "This apartment is now occupied by a new tenant. For inquiries, contact Mr. Wilkins' phone number below." Rachel froze for a few seconds, heat rising from her palms straight to her cheeks. She pulled out her phone and called me. "Ring, ring. Ring the number you have dialed is currently unavailable." She tried again. Same result. She began texting. "Megan, where are you?" "I'm here. The kids are standing in the sun." "Open the door." "What's with the note for Mr. Wilkins?" "Did you really move?" She called Mom. I was still reading on my new balcony chair when my phone started vibrating. Mom's name lit up on the screen. I stared at it for a moment, then placed it face down on the table. The coffee had gone cold, but my heart hadn't. For the first time in my life, I let a family call pass without feeling guilty. Back at the old apartment, Rachel fumbled to call Mr. Wilkins. He answered briefly. "Megan moved out last week. She returned the keys and left everything in order. The unit is in transition now," she shouted. "Where did she go? Why didn't anyone tell me?" He simply replied. "Miss Megan said she needed some space. I figured if she didn't tell you, she probably had her reasons." Rachel froze in place. The 3 kids started getting restless. Lily asked Mom, "Why aren't we going into Aunt Megan's house?" Max tugged her sleeve. "I really need to pee." Aiden looked at his mom and slowly asked, "Did she really leave?" She dialed David. "Are you almost here? I'm parking outside now. Can you open the gate?" She hung up, turned to the 3 kids. Her lips were pressed tight. Her eyes darted to the bags of clothes, toys, pillows, water bottles, medicine kits. Everything. Too visible. Impossible to hide. She couldn't keep this from David. She pulled the kids close and crouched down, whispering fast, "When Uncle David comes, don't call me Mom. Call me Aunt." "Okay?" All 3 looked confused. Max asked, "Then who are you?" Lily blinked. "Aren't we your kids?" Rachel clenched her fists, her lips trembling. "Just for a few minutes. I'll explain later." The gate opened. David walked in, pulling 2 suitcases and holding a bouquet of flowers. "What are you doing out here?" Then his eyes landed on the 3 children. The bouquet slowly dipped in his hand. "Rachel, what is this?" She swallowed. "These are kids from church. I help look after them. Their parents asked me to take them out this morning." David stared into her eyes, unblinking. Aiden spoke up at the worst possible moment. "Are you Mom's new boyfriend?" David said nothing, but his expression changed from confusion to quiet disappointment. He looked at Rachel as if seeing a complete stranger. "Rachel," he said slowly, "I asked you 3 times. You told me you didn't have children." "He wasn't ready to tell you," she whispered. "I was scared you'd leave." "Well, now you did exactly that." He glanced at the kids one last time, then turned, pulling his suitcase behind him. Not a single word more. Rachel called after him. "David, I'm sorry. I just wanted a real chance this time." He didn't stop. The children remained there, not fully understanding, but sensing enough to know something was very wrong. The September morning sky was still clear blue, but the sun no longer felt warm. And I, far from that place, had no idea everything was falling apart exactly the way it had been built on. Lies on assumptions on expectations. No one ever bothered to ask if someone was willing to carry. I was folding laundry when my phone began buzzing non-stop. One message after another appeared. The first name Rachel. "You ruined my life. You think you're so righteous." David blocked me. "The kids cried all night. You'll regret this. I lost everything because of you." Every line hit my eyes like a language I'd long been forced to learn. A language of blame avoidance and placing responsibility for one's life on someone else's shoulders. Then the phone rang. This time it was Mom. I hadn't planned to answer, but then I thought maybe I should just once to end something I should have ended long ago. I picked up Megan. My mother snapped, "What are you doing?" "Your sister called me," sobbing. David left her. "Do you even realize you're destroying her future?" I closed my eyes, studying myself. "I didn't destroy anything, Mom. I just stopped participating in a performance. I stepped away from a role this family forced me into. That's all. You're being selfish. Have you thought about those kids? About the pain your sister is going through?" I let out a soft laugh. No bitterness, no sarcasm, simply too tired to keep pretending. I've thought about those kids for the past 2 years, when I paid half her rent, when I canceled plans with my friends, when I cleaned up her house every time she went off to find herself. But no one in this family ever asked, was I tired? The other end of the line went silent, but I could hear Mom's shallow breathing, the soft spin of her wedding ring against her finger. She always did that when she didn't know what to say. "You may not agree with your sister's choices," she finally said, but she was just trying to build a home. She wanted to do the right thing this time, by hiding her children from her boyfriend, by asking her sister to raise them so she could pretend to be childless. "Megan," she snapped, "don't speak so disrespectfully." I lowered my voice not out of fear, but because I knew when it was time to let go. I didn't kill anyone's dream, Mom. I just stopped killing mine so someone else could chase theirs. I didn't wait for a reply. I hung up. My throat was dry, but my chest felt lighter than it had in years. I turned back to my desk, opened my laptop, logged into my bank account under scheduled transfers. The first item popped up. Rachel Mitchell, $825 month due 5th. I clicked cancel. The system asked if I was sure. I clicked yes, the screen flashed canceled successfully. I took a screenshot, attached it, and sent one final message to Rachel. "Since to you, I'm already dead. I guess you don't need money from a dead person." No emoji, no exclamation point, no wish you well. I didn't need to play a supporting role in anyone's tragedy ever again. I placed the phone face down on the table, poured myself a glass of water, and sat by the window. The afternoon light in Columbus was golden as honey. A gentle breeze moved through the oak trees, far in the distance. The river drifted quietly, as if everything in this world could keep flowing. If only we were brave enough to stop at the right time. The first month in Columbus passed like a slow song. No crescendo, no lyrics. But there were no late-night phone calls, no frantic knocks, followed by, "I'm sorry, it's last minute again." Mornings here begin with birdsong, not the shouting of 3 kids fighting over the TV remote. I woke up early, washed my face with cool water, rolled out my yoga mat on the wooden floor, turned on a soft playlist, and breathed. Truly breathed without anyone calling my name, without responsibilities landing on my shoulders like a sudden blow. I signed up for an online yoga training course, then applied to teach a trial class at a small studio a few blocks away. They took me in saying I had a voice that makes people believe things will be okay. In the afternoons, I worked as a freelance financial consultant for a few small companies, managing expenses, reviewing reports, handling taxes. It was enough to keep me engaged, but not so much that it trapped me in a packed schedule. I worked in a space I chose in leggings with my hair tied up, sipping peppermint tea, and no one asked, "Are you free?" While I was in the middle of something, every weekend I picked a new coffee shop to visit. I took notes in a little notebook, the cafe's name, the view from the window, the signature drink, not to show off, just to remember that I'd been there, that I'd sat in that seat, and that I didn't have to rush home to babysit. Amy, my best friend since college, took the train to visit in the 4th week. She brought a small box of cake, a candle already placed in the center, and knocked on my door like no distance had ever existed between us. "After your birthday got canceled last year, I owe you a proper celebration," Amy said, hugging me like I'd been rescued. We ate cake, drank white wine, and played our old college indie rock playlist. Those songs that now felt slightly cringy, but comfortingly nostalgic. I laughed, not to be polite. I truly laughed, until tears welled up because I felt seen present, not as someone guarding someone else's happiness, but as myself. After that, I started to grow. Used to a life where I didn't have to explain everything, I became friends with Helen, the woman who lived downstairs. She was nearly 30 years older than me, but had a razor-sharp memory and occasionally left her keys in the microwave. One afternoon, while I was helping her find her reading glasses under the couch, she looked at me and said, "You have the smile of someone who stood up again after being shoved hard." I gave no reply, but that sentence echoed in my mind the entire next day. Helen taught me how to make apple pie without sugar. Something she said keeps the kindness without spiking the glucose. I taught her how to set up a social media account so she could follow her online senior dance class. In return, she took me to a used bookstore near the train station full of memoir writing guides and beautiful hardbound journals. I picked a deep blue notebook, no patterns, and I started writing. Not a diary, not a memoir, just scattered notes about what it feels like to step away from a role you never chose. I named the blog Retreat Not Escape. I wrote about the calls that always came with assumptions about the ache of loving the kids, but resenting myself about how quickly people label you selfish when you refuse to sacrifice. No one knew my identity. I used no profile pictures, shared no real name. Yet within a few weeks, the blog began attracting regular readers. A woman in Missouri commented, "I think I'm being a stand-in mom for my sister." 2. A grandmother in Colorado messaged, "Your words are gentle, but after reading, I feel like a knot in my chest just loosened." I didn't reply to everyone, but every time I saw a notification, I smiled. Turns out, there are others stepping out of old roles, and maybe they too need a small map. A simple note along the way to remind them they're not walking alone. There's something I've realized through all this. Sometimes leaving isn't about abandoning others. It's about returning to yourself. Not everyone will understand that. And maybe they don't have to, because everyone has their limits. And the only thing we can do is quietly protect our own boundaries, even if it makes others angry. I'm no longer the woman always ready to sacrifice so someone else can be called complete. And I'm no longer trying to become someone who makes the family proud. I'm simply living honestly, peacefully, and without apologizing for choosing calm. Have you ever been cast into a role you never agreed to play? Have you ever been labeled selfish just for choosing to live your own life? If you have a story like that, share it. Somewhere out there, someone might need to hear they're not alone. And if you want to keep following stories about family, about boundaries, about how ordinary people find their way back to themselves after being lost in others' expectations, don't forget to follow this channel so you won't miss what comes next.